Hi, my name's Dave Adams.
And I'm Ricky Sherwood.
And you're watching the Core Mechanic.
Today we are looking at number 50 on Mike Selinker's 100 games you absolutely, positively have to know how to play. Uno!
Uno!
Uno was designed and self-published by Merie Robbins in 1971. He later sold the game to a friend, which was picked up by Mattel in 1992. The game plays between 1 and 4 players with an average game time of about 30 minutes. Ah, Uno, where would we be without you?
I'd still be here, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But we wouldn't have exploding kittens. Sorry.
That's a good point. Probably wouldn't have a few interesting games like that.
Yeah. In fact, one of the more interesting things about Uno is it's not just numbers and suits, is it?
No, it introduced wild cards as well as effect cards.
Effect cards.
The whole introduction of reverse or skip. Or draw 4.
Yep. Punishing your opponents.
Yeah, and it was a development of an older game called Crazy Eights, where it was just Crazy Eights just uses a deck of cards. You have a hand of cards, and the innovative idea of that is that you have to get rid of your cards first, or you're not collecting tricks. You're just trying to eliminate your hand, which I suppose was innovative in itself of the time.
Yeah. Well, this is 1971.
Well, and Crazy Eights was around for
even before that. Yeah.
But the idea that you would have a deck of cards, you play cards, and the person after you has to follow either suit or number. And if you had an 8 in your hand and you played the 8, you got to dictate what suit the next player had to play, which is kind of what then developed into you've got numbers of 1 to 25, I think, and then you've got your effect cards, the reverse, skip, and your wild cards, and you draw 4 with wild cards.
Yes. Now, probably the reason we keep going back to this effect thing is where would we be without cards that do effects? Well, we probably wouldn't have most collectible card games for a start.
Pretty much most modern games that use cards are utilizing various effects. Yeah. We played Eminent Domain just recently.
Yeah.
Every card you draw or utilize has some sort of effect. In fact, multiple effects for many of these games now.
Yep. Ascension, Dominion even had this idea. Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!
Pokemon.
Yep. All of these games now work on this idea that cards do something rather than just represent a color and a number, and I think that Uno is probably the progenitor to all of that.
Yeah, you had games like Monopoly, of course.
Sure.
But that wasn't I'm playing this card from my hand. These cards were resources. They represented things in the game.
Yep.
But the idea that I play a card that affects you as a player is a really big deal.
It does something to the turn structure of the game.
And it gives me agency in the game.
Yep.
It's not just I'm responding to a situation, or it's not just me trying to capitalize or taking a turn. It's me changing the game state for the people after me. It's
rarely the first sort of card game to bring in this element of true strategy, of saving your cards to do something, or picking certain cards, or being selective about draws, or holding back on a certain card.
I think one of the big things that we should note is exactly that this is possibly one of the biggest house-ruled game ever.
Oh yes, have you ever played an actual game of Uno?
I've never actually played it following the rules,
Neither
not once. Simply because, as we would have said in the actual rule set, the game is based around scoring. Yeah. I've never scored a game of Uno in my life.
It's not once. It's first to hand out and then you win, right?
Well, that's how it's always played. In fact, that's how it's always taught. I think you even mentioned it's just that whole cultural thing of one person teaches another, and no one reads the rules on Uno.
Yeah. Basically, someone along the line got bored of playing to 500, I believe it is.
100 points.
Was it? So they just said, nope, we're just playing one game, and that's how I'm going to teach my friends and my kids, and voila, that's where we are today.
That's where we are today, absolutely. And I think in some senses, the house rules better.
Yes.
I mean, I don't always want to play multiple games of Uno, and I wouldn't want to play it to a point where everyone's had a turn and everyone's won a game, and you're up to your 5th game still trying to determine a victor. That would bore me to tears. But the immediacy of you're the first one out, so you win the game, I think is far more rewarding than you're the first one out, you're closer to winning the game.
Definitely. You don't want your game to overstay its welcome, I guess, would be the big lesson. And if house ruling resulted in that, that's probably something that the game designer should pay attention to.
Well, and certainly not interfere with, and I don't think they do. I don't know.
There's not going to have Uno tournaments that...
Well, that's right. The funny thing is I wonder how many people are actually even playing the cards correctly. Because technically, you're not allowed to play a wild or draw 4 wild unless you have none of those colours in your hand. If it's a red 16 or a red 20, whatever, and you can't play a number or a suit that follows, then you can play the wild. Whereas for most people, it's just, I'm going to play it at the most strategic and advantageous time.
Which I think is an interesting insight into the development of player thought by that stage. People were looking to be strategic, whether or not they knew they were cheating.
Well,
that's something else. But hey, if everyone cheats the same way, then I suppose it's just a new rule.
That's right. So it really, one of the things that does is they're trying to keep those powerful cards out of the game until they're absolutely necessary, but people love them.
Yeah.
Like that I think they are an essential part of the game. Being able to drop a wild when you and put it to a suit that you know is going to force your opponent to draw.
Yeah.
You know it's going to force to draw. Whether you can play a number or a suit doesn't matter. I'm going to drop that wild and I'm going to change that number.
And it's exactly that kind of thinking that makes me think this must have had some sort of influence on collectible card games.
Oh, absolutely.
Does it remind you of interacting on the stack or chaining?
Chaining, resolving resolutions. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's all there in Uno to a lesser degree.
Okay, so in terms of being on the list, it clearly was for its time innovative and creative.
Yep.
But at the same time, I've got to wonder why it's still such a popular game today.
Well, I suppose you could look at the fact that it's marketed so well. Any toy shop you go into, some 7-Elevens you'll go into, it's everywhere. And
it's a lot of game. Like, it's a big game for $5. Like, you pick it up at Target, came up for $5, and there's a lot of gameplay in that. Like, you could sit down and have a good hour session, and that's cheap. Yeah. Like, that's cheap for 5 people sitting around for an hour playing a game. Like, that's good quality. That's good value. As well as I think it's fun. Like,
Uno is absolutely fun. I also think it's on the list because it shows game designers something really important, and that's you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just got to make it more interesting.
Oh, for sure. Like, Crazy Eights is a good game.
Sure.
I mean, it's easy if you've got a deck of cards. But Uno is way more interesting.
Yeah.
And the thing I like about it is that every card is a potential game-winning card.
Yes.
I mean, the draw 4 sometimes isn't really that big a disadvantage. It can be, but it's not necessarily a big disadvantage, especially if playing that draw 4 means you're out of that specific colour and suit, and if you can keep that colour and suit alive, then all you've done is create a draw condition for that player. So the idea that everyone's in it at any point, I've never felt, even when I've got multiple cards to their few cards, I've never felt out of the game. Because I know at any stage it could come down to, I'll get all my cards down and they'll start drawing cards because they can't play that number or suit. One of the things I think that made this game such an impact was that player interaction. The fact that I could impact the state of play. And that's got to be one of the reasons I think this is on the list for Mike Selinker. As well as something that, as a game designer, I can take away from this. To think through, and not just take that elements, but to also think about how me as a player can genuinely change the state of play.
The thing about Uno is, once again, it's one of those games that everyone has played. But you can also consider it sort of the progenitor to far more interesting games that came in afterwards. Once again, moving away from that sort of 1940s, 1950s Monopoly and chess mindset.
Yeah, and it still hasn't lost any of its intrigue or value.
No, you can absolutely play that, and most kids probably will at school or if they're going on a long trip. As you mentioned, price-wise, $5, really easy to pick up a copy, play.
Also got to consider the fact that each turn is so short.
Yes.
You can go around a circle in no time whatsoever. There's no real I suppose analysis paralysis in the game. Everybody's invested in every play, so player engagement is high. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot to give praise for Uno.
Yeah.
But look, Uno's a great classic game, and maybe you've got a classic game that you enjoy, or even you like Uno or hate Uno. Tell us about it in the comment section below. Until then, my name's Dave Adams.
And I'm Ricky Sherwood.
And you've been watching The Core Mechanic.